Ahmed is 2 days old and, like his brother, was born in Iraq. A generation of Syrian children who hear about their homeland but have never been outside a refugee camp in another country. Noor is happy to be a big sister again. She wants to become a doctor so she can take care of people in the camp. She tells us her parents talked to her about Syria, but she doesn't remember it. They had to escape in 2013 when ISIL fighters began threatening the people of Qamishli, and they don't think they'll be going home anytime soon.
3 of my children were born here. We feel it's safer than Syria, away from killings and kidnappings.
Around 2,500 people live in the remote Baserma camp. It's one of 10 in the northern Kurdish region for Syrian refugees. But of nearly 250,000 Syrians in Iraq, just 40% are in camps. The rest live in informal settlements with host communities. This hospital was set up by Syrian refugees. Dr. Mahmoud SAMO calls it home now, despite all the challenges and inequalities. He arrived in Iraq with just the clothes on his back and then tried to move on before coming back.
I traveled to Germany with my sons, but I cannot live there. I returned to ABDUL, then studied to get an Iraqi medical certification. I have a steady income, and I serve Syrian refugees and other Iraqis.
For those living in the camp, there is no work in surrounding villages because of the pandemic. Before COVID-19, almost 2/3 of the refugees had jobs, but most are now dependent on humanitarian aid. It costs about $10 to go to the nearest city to look for work, and most people cannot afford it. There's been no additional support during the coronavirus crisis. Schools were closed in 2020, and although reluctant to speak on camera, camp managers tell us 35 teachers have not been paid since last year. UNICEF says the Ministry of Education is responsible for the payments. But Iraq's struggling economy and rifts between Baghdad's central government and the Kurdish regional government means many people have worked for months without receiving any money. Donor fatigue and waning international interest have only made matters worse. Officials here call the plight of Syrian refugees a forgotten humanitarian crisis.
There's a need for around $225 million yearly to meet the needs of the Syrian refugees in the camps and also outside camps, but this has never been provided. And connecting the humanitarian assistance to the development and resiliency building of these refugees. So once they will be able, or the conditions are prepared in the place already, when they go back, so they will have the skills and capacities and the human resources to rebuild.
7-year-old Yusuf is as old as this camp. He's never seen a shopping mall and does not know what an iPad is. For the older generation, they reminisce about the old days in Syria and those left behind. It's been 10 years since the war in Syria. Every Syrian we've spoken to says they want to go back. But with no end in sight to the conflict, home is this 7-year-old camp for the foreseeable future. Osama bin Javaid, Aljazeera, Shaqlawa, northern Iraq.